This is ContactTalkRadio.com. Consciousness in action. And you are taking action into your consciousness by tuning into Contact Talk Radio.
And on TuneIn.com, Ping.fm, and UpSnap Mobile.
Contact Talk Radio.
Long ago, before this day's confusion did begin, throughout the stars did we go wandering. Distance was no barrier, and time it had no hope. Free to come and free to go. Free to come and free to go. Open up the book of stars. Open up the
And welcome to Karmic Evolution's Astrologically Speaking. I'm your host, SHERI Horn Hasan of Karmic Evolution Astrology, and I'm coming to you on September 2nd, 2021 from Contact Talk Radio. Just a quick reminder that this show aims to bring you the truth about astrology and your soul's karmic evolution. I am my own guest today, and I'll get more into that in a few, but first, my usual housekeeping stuff, which is to tell you that you can listen to Karmic Evolution's Astrologically Speaking anytime by simply going to my website at karmicevolution.com and clicking on the banner labeled Radio Show. From there, you can scroll down the page and hear the most recent show, either live if you tune in at 11 a.m. Pacific and 2 p.m. Eastern every Thursday, or recorded. And or you can search the archive listings, for past shows that you may have missed or to which you want to listen again. Separately, follow me on my Facebook page, Karmic Evolution for Your Soul, where you can sign up for my Conversations About Consciousness newsletter as well. And finally, I'm still offering my 1-hour discounted Karmic Evolution Natal Insight reading for listeners for only $99, and this is for those who want to gain greater consciousness about their soul's true mission and purpose in this lifetime, who want to move from chaos to clarity in their relationships, their career, finances, or health, who want to heal old karmic wounds and co-create their own future happiness and success, and also for those who desire to awaken to their true potential and highest destiny in this lifetime. This becomes much easier when you take advantage of my special discounted offer for listeners, a 1-hour Karmic Evolution Natal Insight reading for only $99. Simply email me, that's Sheri, S-H-E-R-I, at karmicevolution.com, and we'll get your reading booked today. At almost half the regular price, conscious awareness has never been so easy or so affordable. So I look forward to hearing from any of you who want to snap up this special offer. All right, so as I said before, I'm solo today. I feel like it's been a year since I've done a live show. So thank you for your patience, everyone who is a regular listener. I really do appreciate your patronage, and I'm trying to get back in the groove. My sun, the transiting sun, has been going through my 12th house, and I also have a sun opposite Neptune natally, because the 12th house is naturally ruled by Neptune. It's a little bit of a spacier period for me. So the sun is almost at my ascendant in a couple of days over the Labor Day weekend, and after that it will go into my first house. I have a Virgo rising, so hopefully my brain will start to come back into logical, rational formation, because let's just put it this way. I've been watching a lot of movies this past month. And some of them are tear jerkers. So let's say no more, right? Neptune is the unconscious and the repressed energies and the subconscious portion of the psyche where we may not understand our emotional motivations because we can't see them, right? And if we repress them, we can't feel them until they come out in our tears or some other way. So better that than anger, I guess. But anyway, I digress. Let's get to this week's Astro news you can use. So first, I want to talk about the Mars in Virgo opposition to Neptune in Pisces, which perfected literally just about 15 minutes before the show went live. So Mars is the archetype of the warrior, as most of you know, and the Roman name Neptune represents also the Greek god Poseidon, who was the ruler of the seas. Now, this aspect clearly started waxing in strength as Hurricane Ida made landfall in Louisiana on Sunday, a couple days ago now, and then began to make its way up the east coast of the U.S. Last night, it hit us here in New Jersey, which is where I live, as well as parts of Pennsylvania and New York, including New York City. Train service was halted in New Jersey, going, to Pennsylvania, to New York, or into New York, which is a major thoroughfare for those who don't know, because Central Jersey and Northern Jersey are bedroom communities for New York City, for those who work in New York City but choose to live in New Jersey where land is a little bit cheaper. And the New York City subway system was actually closed. Now, for those of you who remember Hurricane Sandy, that was the last time, as far as I know, that streets were as flooded as they were, particularly in the downtown area. I remember Battery Park City got quite a dose of the rainfall out of Sandy. And of course, it caused all kinds of destruction along the coastal areas in New Jersey and New York. But in any case, the subway system was closed. I did read something that said in one particular station, people were knee-deep in water, which, the subway systems, I haven't ridden the New York City subway system for a very long time, so maybe I don't know what I'm talking about anymore, but let me tell you, it's bad enough down there. You don't need to be submerged in water. So anyway, they closed the subway system. And this area received, or particular parts of the tri-state area received more rain in 1 to 2 hours than it had all year long. And at last count, again, right before I went live, 18 people have died as a result of this storm, including 8 out of the 9 who perished in New York City did so in their basements. Now, I'll just throw this out as an aside. And I mentioned this on one of my past shows, but I think it's one that never got recorded. So only if you were listening live did you probably hear it. I was fascinated at one point with the fact that I'd seen an article that Brian May, who's the guitarist for the band Queen, had his basement flooded. This was back in July. And what I know from my astrological learning is that anytime water seeps up from below, in particular, sometimes just from the outside in, but usually up from below, particularly in instances where you have a toilet backing up. And the reason I say that is because these things are related to Pluto transits. So whenever water rises from below, we can be reasonably certain that any person or people affected are having a Pluto transit, because again, this is a classic occurrence. When your toilet bowl backs up, when there's sewage that's leaking up, but also just plain water. It doesn't obviously necessarily signify death, but rather that something important needs to come up into the light from the unconscious realm. Now, what it might be for each person who passed as a result of flooding, I don't know, of course. But I'd be willing to bet that karmically at least, and I'm not trying to be callous here, but, I do look at things in this kind of a way. It's time for the soul, or that particular soul, to return to the underworld so that they can later come back and retread a new path, a new, slightly different karmic path, right? Because if we accept the belief that our soul doesn't die when the body gives out and the soul comes back to reincarnate, that it's working on lifetimes worth of a lesson, and that these people, for whatever reason, were taken at a particular time and will be back to, to continue their soul learning at a later date and time. Bless them in any case, and may they all rest in peace. Meanwhile, Hurricane Ida, which this was part of, which hit Louisiana hard, as I said, last Saturday, has to date left hundreds of thousands of people without water and electricity, a particularly dire situation for those who rely on electric-powered devices such as dialysis machines, ventilators, etc., and those, particularly the elderly and the very young, who are more susceptible to the extreme heat there this time of year. So Mars, which is heat, obviously, opposite Neptune, which is water, almost feels like the great flood of biblical proportions as we watch the effects of climate change occur throughout the globe on an almost daily basis at this point. I'm reminded of an old TV commercial from my youth that carried the tagline, "You can't fool Mother Nature." This was an ad, I believe, for butter at a time when, margarine was flooding the market, and, the consensus was that margarine was better for you than butter. But the butter company, the ad carried the message that you don't want to anger Mother Nature by disrespecting her and creating something that is not made out of real cream, real milk, real cream, whatever. So it's just very, ironic in a way. All of the unnatural gases released when we do fracking and other things that cause toxicity to the environment, it's as though, Mother Nature is pretty much saying, okay, enough, right? So Mars, which is one of the most naturally instinctive planetary archetypal energies, it's Mars and Aries that signals to us when it's time to be born, since, Mars and Aries naturally rule the ascendant and the first house in everyone's chart. And when Mars is pissed off, he knows no boundaries. So he's instinctively thrust into the kind of blind rage that doesn't lend itself to moderation. So picking up on the theme of the commercial, you can't fool Mother Nature. I remember that it had a woman, probably a middle-aged woman with a little crown on, playing with dark hair, playing Mother Nature, who looks disapprovingly at anything but the butter. So this is not disapproving, this is outright pissed off, right? So Neptune, which is again an outer planet, representative archetypally of the collective unconscious, brings to the surface the notion that we're all one rather than separate human beings, and therefore all in this thing we call life together, right? So we might look at this recent hurricane's damage and toll on human life under the lens of the nature versus the unnatural environment. And again, Mother Nature is indeed pissed off. Climate change occurrences such as these would seem to reveal the rebellion of the natural world against man-made incursions on its ability to provide us clean air to breathe, clean water to drink, arable land into which to plant, etc., to build, structures that are solid enough at their foundational core to withstand some of these natural disasters. And that Mother Nature is signaling to us enough is enough. Now, it is an interesting aside that in Louisiana, down by New Orleans, right, which was hit, I believe it was 20 years ago to the day that they got hit with Hurricane Katrina, that the modifications and improvements that were made to the structures there, the levees that were put in place to withstand the high winds and the high waves and all that did hold in that area. So that's the good news there. And we also have, of course, the continuation of the spread of COVID-19, which waxes and wanes globally as it mutates and finds new ways to infect different groups of people. Again, Mars, oh, I can't kill you this way? Well, let me do it that way, right? I mean, yes, all of these archetypes have extremely positive energies, but there's also always a negative side. So, Mars opposite Neptune is also continuing to spread like water through the air, whatever. This, Mars is in Virgo. It's not an air sign, but it's ruled by Mercury. Mercury is about thought process, and perceptions. So, COVID-19 continues to mutate. And like I said, find new ways to infect different groups of people. First, the elderly, right? At the beginning of the pandemic, we saw the nursing homes filled with people who were contracting COVID, and now children. And of course, the unvaccinated, of which children under 12 make up a large portion of our population, especially now as they go back to school in groups. So what does all of this mean? And how can we best cope with what's happening now? Well, it seemed to me that it made more sense, for the sake of clarity, to take a step back, especially since I've not been doing lives for a little while, before moving forward. And that in the interest of finding the best way for all of us to integrate this past month's energies into our personal lives, by giving everyone a little bit more of an observatory look at what's been happening in the macrocosm of the collective. And you guys know, who listen to my show regularly, that as above, so below means to me that we can see the energies of the heavens mirrored in what happens in our overall environment, whether that's globally, whether it's nationally, whether it's locally, and then we can extrapolate that energy down into our personal lives to see how clearly or how strongly it's affecting us. And that would tell us, without even knowing your chart at all, whether some of these energies are actually hitting your chart in sensitive places. So if not, we're just observers, and we can still understand these energies as part of the bigger picture. And that is never going to hurt us, at least in my opinion, right? Knowledge is power. That's what I say. So let's go back to the Leo New Moon, which occurred on August 8th, and which was when both luminaries were in Leo and squared Uranus in Taurus. At that time, right before and since, part of what we've clearly witnessed was the fall from grace of many of those who we considered to be heroes, or at least admired for their ability to kind of keep it together during times when we all needed reassurance. The Leo archetype, of course, is the king. It has a connotation, as does Jupiter and Sagittarius, with royalty. It's the ruler. In mundane astrology, the sun represents the ruler, whether that is an actual monarch, whether it is the head of state, and whether that head of state is, democratically elected or running an autocracy. It doesn't really matter. But the point is that Leo is the ruler of the sun. The sun is, in traditional astrology, what we call dignified. So that archetype always represents people in positions of power, whether they are benevolent or whether they are less benevolent, right? So, and I'd mentioned this before, so for those who heard it before, forgive me for repeating it, but I want to reiterate that the clearest example to me, and again, I'm an East Coaster, born and raised in New York. Not everybody all around the globe was paying attention to this, but I thought that the fall from grace of New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, who, after a New York State Attorney General's investigation into sexual harassment, found him guilty of harassing at least 11 women during his tenure, resigned from office. Now, Cuomo had become somewhat of a national voice of reason because of his daily televised COVID-19 reports that not only calmed many of the citizens in the New York City and state and tri-state area at that time, but also those beyond, mostly due to his rational, calm, just the facts, ma'am kind of delivery. When juxtaposed against the conflicting and confusing messages coming out of the Trump administration's Corona task force at that time and directly from President Trump, Cuomo served an important purpose to help calm and alleviate the worst fears of those who we were seeing in body bags piling up outside of hospitals and who were being placed in Central Park in New York City because of the overflow of the ICUs, and that necessitated the calling in of the National Guard. Now, that was early in the pandemic. That was last March, a year ago, March and April. And after that, it hit here, it subsequently made its way around different parts of the country. So Cuomo's remarks and his daily presence was calming, as I said before, and a balm for those of us who really were starting to freak out. And, that was also particularly true among the population of those who lost loved ones with whom they were unable to communicate. So maybe, if they were lucky, they got to say goodbye by phone, but not to hold or hug or comfort their loved ones in their worst hours of need and at their literal passing. So Cuomo had become a little bit of what I would label a national hero. And so August 8th, at that new moon, right before that, Mercury squared also Uranus. And those few days leading up to that new moon and after marked the time when not only Cuomo, but also others began to fall in stature and reputation. Now, people can think back. There's people in the political world, celebrities, athletes, etc., that you may remember. I'm not going to name them all here. The time has passed. It was a month ago. And, but R. Kelly is on trial. That's another sexual case. I'm going to get into the stuff that's happened in Kabul and Afghanistan, and this will clearly also apply to people like Joe Biden, our current president, but also the waning influence of people like former President Trump. So all we need to do is check the news to get up to speed on these things, or simply remember that feeling of disappointment if and when something dishonest or someone admired, someone who was dishonest but previously admired was found to have broken the law, transgressed boundaries in a negative way, to cheat, to steal, to lie, to embezzle, or otherwise took actions designed to keep them in power. And again, as a more local aside, Cuomo was known in Albany, the capital of New York State, as an autocrat who ruled with an iron hand and brooked no interference for his agenda. One of the other things that they accused him of that became part and parcel of his downfall, which was really precipitated by the sexual investigation by the New York State Attorney General, was the fact that he hid data about nursing home deaths during the early months of COVID in New York State. And he did that purposely so he wouldn't look bad. So he was also reportedly a man with a temper who dressed down verbally and castigated those who worked for him. So reputation and reality coalesced here at this time of that Leo new moon to conspire toward events that led to his swift ultimate downfall, and that's the square to Uranus, and at least for now. So between then, and if we move on to the August 22nd Aquarius full moon, it seems relatively clear in hindsight that the energy at that time expanded the desire to take flight and to move rapidly towards greater freedom. So the quest to break away at that time became especially illustrated because the Leo Sun exact opposed Jupiter in Aquarius. This is the Aquarius full moon that occurred at the end of Aquarius, and also was the second full moon in a month's time, known as a blue moon, meaning we got the first one prior to the Leo new moon that basically gave us the same archetypal themes, but with different details, right? So it's kind of like, all right, the message came through twice in 1 month that freedom is a theme here. And during that time, too, obviously over these past 2 months, we've seen the, I'm going to say this, propaganda-induced mindset, shall we say, that people have the right to do what they want versus do what helps protect society as a whole. So this has been growing in energy, right? And again, when the Aquarius full moon hit on August 22nd, it really illustrated to us the expansion because of Jupiter's prominence here. Again, as I said, the Leo Sun opposed Jupiter exact a few days before, and on the same day, which was August 19th, that Uranus stationed retrograde, and the moon conjoined Jupiter. So just a few days before the actual lunation, this expansive need to be free overtook the collective. Now Aquarius, which is a fixed air sign whose modern ruler is Uranus, represents groups, communities, and tribes of people, particularly those concerned with a mission, a goal, or a specific objective. And in Taurus, Uranus's current retrograde asks us to review and reevaluate society's values as a whole, particularly in light of any new or revelatory insights or aha moments that arrived spontaneously between its retrograde station on August 19th and its station direct, which isn't going to occur until January 18th of 2022. So such Uranian-type insights are designed to bring change to our long-term perception of the future. And since it's station retrograde, any new information, which is only, less than 2 weeks ago, any new information that's been revealed to us or that has come to us intuitively may have changed our way of thinking about the future. And because this occurred in tandem with Jupiter in Aquarius, which is also now ruled by Uranus, which is retrograde, right, reaching its halfway mark in its own retrograde cycle on August 18th. And that was a time when we began to realize that our old or existing plans would no longer be possible to carry out in the future. So these two energies combined exponentially expanded our desire to escape from our present situation and to reevaluate our plans for the future so that they better fit our changing values. Hence, the resulting desire during these past few weeks to rapidly take flight toward greater freedom in both our thinking and our ability to manifest what we need, which is different from what we simply want for the future. So nowhere do we have a better example of this mirrored back to us from the collective than in the recent airlift out of Kabul, Afghanistan, of those whose movements were suddenly curtailed and who feared for their lives if they got left behind. Again, as above, so below. I'm not commenting on the rightness or the wrongness, the preparedness or lack thereof of the plan to evacuate. I'm simply noting that it happened and that it happened at that time. So the reason for this suddenness, again, was foretold by Jupiter's retrograde in Aquarius reaching its halfway point in its retrograde cycle. Now, I did talk about this about a month ago, but I wanted to emphasize it again because I think people have a tendency when they use astrology to portend the future to immediately forget the past. And because astrology is the study of cycles that repeat themselves, this is not really a good idea. So if I sound like I'm hammering home a point repetitively, it's because we must look back in order to see what's happened and how we responded to it that led to both a positive or a negative event or situation in our lives, so that we can look ahead and determine whether or not we should react or act the same way as we did in the past when similar problems occur. So the Jupiter retrograde midway point, which occurred August 18th or 19th, as I mentioned before, is typically a time when we recognize that past plans may have gone awry, not manifested as we'd originally hoped, or otherwise given us reason to abandon them now. And it pays to remember, just as I mentioned about the Aquarius full moon on August 22nd, that Jupiter represents expansion. And first and foremost, that means expansion of consciousness. And in Aquarius, whose modern ruler just had stationed retrograde, this presents the potential for a rapid, expansive change, again sparked by new Uranian flashes of insight and revelatory aha moments that could lead to the development of new perspectives. And those new perspectives, particularly during the Uranus retrograde period from August 18th to January 18th of 2022, will, when Uranus stations direct again, will be the basis for us to free ourselves from old plans, ideas, beliefs, and ways of thinking in order to begin to rethink, revise, redo, replan, and re-envision our own futures now. Like the eagle, which symbolizes the ability to fly high above the earth and survey any situation from an alternative bird's eye view, alternative from that of the view of looking from the vantage point of standing on earth, but instead of that, looking from the sky down to see the earth as a whole, or the whole big picture, the Aquarian archetype relates to greater objectivity. Now, it's from rising, as I said, above the earthly plane that we may see the whole picture from a rational, more rational, and less emotional distance. And with Jupiter in Aquarius now gaining, now continuing its retrograde, but the second half of its retrograde period, until it stations direct again on October 18th, our revised plans begin to take shape as we recognize what's part of practical reality and what is not. I mean, Jupiter has the ability, a little like Neptune and their rulerships of Pisces and Sagittarius, to lead to wishful or fanciful thinking. It can, at its worst, this is delusionary, and at its best, it's, I got an idea. Let me see if it makes sense to put it into practical, manifestable reality. And if it's not manifestable in the real world, because that's the world that we all chose, or our souls all chose to reincarnate into, right? Then it's not going to take us where we think we want to go. So now we're about 2 weeks or so, as I said, into this period where Jupiter is finalizing its retrograde period. Got another 6 weeks or so to go. I had discussed previously, too, that at the midway point, which was August 19th, there's often an explosive kind of energy. And that's something that I got from Erin Sullivan's Retrograde Planets book. She's brilliant on this stuff, too. I've mentioned her many times before on the show, but anyone who's interested in looking at retrograde planetary energy, both natally and by transit, from the psychological level, it's a must read. So I highly recommend it. Retrograde Planets by Aaron Sullivan. Anyway, the Aquarian desire for greater freedom relates to wanting to rise above our current situation, predicament, dilemma, and to change for the better. And to do so, we're capable of putting aside emotions to get the job done both quickly. Remember, Uranus ruled Aquarius, like speed, and well. So, again, no current mundane situation seems to have better symbolized these energies than the rush, Uranus, to move groups of people, Aquarius, due to philosophical, religious, and political differences, Jupiter, about who's in charge and who makes the rules. Jupiter again, right? The king of the gods. So if we extrapolate this down into our personal lives now, here are some of the questions we might ask ourselves as we begin to move toward next week's September 6th Virgo New Moon energy, which will focus us on determining the details of any new plans that are emerging from our psyches now. So the questions are, do I still hold the same philosophy as before, or am I now aware of the need to change some of my beliefs? And what revelations exactly sparked this need? What came into my consciousness? Where was the lyrics to once I was blind, but now I can see always come to me. Amazing grace, right? And where must I revise my previous plans or perhaps develop totally new ones? And again, there's a lot of nuance in there, right? Some of us have had plans and now we've realized that they need tweaking. Others of us have had plans and now we realize we no longer have interest in them. We've lost interest for whatever reason, or we've just hit a brick wall and recognize that they must be totally abandoned. But now is the period where our Uranian revelations can let in the light for us to go, oh, wait, okay, that wasn't really what I wanted to do. Now I see what I want to do. So these questions may elicit different answers for each of us. But regardless, it behooves us all to contemplate them now in order to gain greater clarity and consciousness moving forward. So again, Uranus, retrograde or otherwise, is an archetypal planet that reminds us that the only constant is change. And he's in Taurus, and Taurus is about values, and Taurus hates change. So we already know inherently, for the better part of the first half of Uranus's transit through Taurus, because he takes 7 years and he's been there since 2018, that, we must understand that without change, there can be no evolutionary progress, and that everything would remain stagnant or in stasis. And, I haven't said this in a long time, but to me, one of my major astrological learnings is that the universe hates stasis. So ignoring the need for change only increases the likelihood that when change does occur, it'll be swift and shocking. And that doesn't mean that all shocks to the system will prove negative in the end, but a shock is a shock nonetheless. And the reason why in evolutionary astrology, Uranus and Aquarius signatures often relate to trauma. So shocks are meant to progress evolutionary purpose, and it's in reaction to surprising events that we must eventually adjust our thinking. And if we fail to do so, we impede our inner evolutionary need for progress, which is really, when we're talking about that and we're talking about archetypes like Pluto, evolutionary process means things will always change. And that's the Uranian component of it. But as they change, the Plutonic component of it is we must adapt. And if we refuse to adapt, again, Pluto, we die. So, we can look at that in so many different contexts. We can look at that in the context of what I mentioned in terms of climate change, right? If we don't make some changes now to adapt to the changes that have occurred based on human behavior, then we will face increasingly dire situations where not everyone is going to be safe, or at least as safe as they were assured to be in previous years, decades, centuries, etc. We can look at it too in a more narrow way, which is my example of the political situation, political and military situation in terms of Afghanistan. So, clearly as a nation, the United States was a little late in recognizing that it actually needed to make changes here, because whether we're pouring good money after bad, whether we were attempting to change a previous regime or lack thereof into a democratic one. I mean, there's a million ways we could verbalize this or look at it rationally, but the point is that we needed to get out. And so at the Jupiter halfway point in its retrograde cycle in Aquarius this time around, because Jupiter retrogrades every year, so it's not like this happens every year, but there is always the same evolutionary process, right? It might not be projected as greatly on the grand, screen of global life, but where we were left to say, okay, in order for us to survive the best way we know how, we've got to make some changes in our thinking, changes in perspective, and circumstances, like I said before, conspired to cause us to say, okay, we're out. I always think of Seinfeld, any Seinfeld fans out there, where Kramer, they're taking a bet. It had something to do with, well, I'm going to say this, it's crude, but how long they could all go without masturbating or something. And, like an hour later, Kramer comes in and he slams down his little card and he goes, I'm out. And they all look at him like, you lasted a whole hour? Too funny. So anyway, we're out, right? And now the question remains, can we utilize the resources that we put into something for the past 20 years in a way that changes our perspective, frees up the funding? A lot has been said about, I don't even remember, it's $3 trillion over the past 20 years. How many lives lost? Obviously of American military, but also far greater numbers of Afghanis. I mean, the whole thing is just, you can look at it politically any way you want. My point is that the facts, quote unquote, remain the same, which are that these energies were inherent in the heavens at the time that all this happened. So let's move on now and talk about the fact that we've got a lot of retrogrades still in the sky, okay? And the fact that, and this is something I mentioned a few weeks ago too, during all of this that I've been talking about, right, we've experienced a huge amount of quincunxes in the sky. Quincunx is a 150-degree aspect between planets that represents adjustments. Bernadette Brady, in her book, Bernadette Brady is a traditional astrologer who published a book back in the early 80s called Predictive Astrology, The Eagle and the Lark. And in it, she defines in a very matter-of-fact way the energies of aspects. And in the energy of a quincunx, the two planets are not 180 degrees apart, so they cannot see each other, or the two archetypes, both of the planet and the sign that they're transiting through. And if you want to get more specific, in the houses that they might be transiting in your particular chart or our particular charts, represents a kind of niggling problem that reflects a small version of the bigger problem. So you need to make repairs in your roof, for example, but the quincunx is she describes it as like a pebble or sand in your shoe, right? So it's something more minor that occurs during a bigger problem that you need to adjust. So we've been having a huge amount of quincunxes over the last few weeks and continue to have one for the next week. We have similar for the next week or two. And that says that adjustments are necessary. Again, we could look back at all of the aspects that happened between the August 22nd Aquarius full moon and now leading into the Virgo new moon. But what we'll see is that, we have to turn on a dime. There are many, many situations where, just again, using Afghanistan as an example, right? Today we're getting this many people out. The next day the Taliban are preventing people from coming. The next day a bomb goes off, but it's not the Taliban, it's ISIS. The next day we strike back. The next day we're trying to get 2 people, and Marines and others, former military, are going in and trying to get people out of other places, either in Kabul or other places in Afghanistan, to rescue them. I mean, there's very much adjustments, right, on a daily basis. So if you recognize any of that in your own life, I would say personally, I have a Cancer moon, so I was like, oh, I feel moody as hell. It's like today I want to do this, and 2 hours later I don't want to do that, and then 4 hours later I did it. It's like it's up and down. Some people may be more sensitive to these energies, others less, but adjustment, and with the perspectives. New perspectives coming in based on your Uranian energy, and retreats from old plans, and looking forward to building a stronger foundation for new plans. We can see that in addition to these quincunxes, we've had Pluto, Neptune, now Uranus, Jupiter, and Saturn all retrograde in the sky. Now, some astrologers make a big deal about that, but basically, I think most would agree the energies are turned inward, right? Again, just look at Afghanistan. And I'm not using this pejoratively or judgmentally, but we had to turn and flee, right? So your energies go inward, right? I need to protect myself, get me out of here. There isn't a lot of time for a rational thought, although hopefully rational thought did follow emotional thought, because in order to get out, you needed to have a rational plan. But it also, was indicative of the fact that things had to move slowly and yet readjust every single day, sometimes every hour. All right? So this energy is still in effect. That's what I'm trying to say. Now, we're moving into a period where Mercury moved into Venus-ruled Libra on August 29th, which was 2 days before we had the deadline to get out of Afghanistan, which we met, as many of you know. There's a lot of lingering resentment over the fact that people are not, necessarily, people didn't make it out who should have made it out. So that's another situation entirely. We have some of these quincunxes to Chiron, which is the wounded healer, which brings up a lot of grief, especially since Chiron's in Aries right now. Grief and anger and rage, right? And we've seen that expressed on the national and the global scene from everyone, from our people in our military to average citizens to those who also have, sorry, hold on a second. In any case, I think my internet might have just gone out, but we'll continue. Hold on. In any case, I am recording this on my own because I had a feeling something was going to happen. My electric just went out, and I don't know if I lost my Wi-Fi, and therefore the connection to the engineer at Contact Talk Radio. But in any case, let me continue, and we will upload this. So if you had this live presentation interrupted, you'll be able to get the whole tape now. So again, Mercury moved into Venus-ruled Libra on August 29th, and we're going to probably find that our communications have to be more of a you can get more flies with honey than with vinegar philosophy for now in order to achieve any desired results. And Mercury is going to spend a while in Libra, since the messenger god will retrograde in this sign beginning September 26th and last until, sorry, it's my phone. I don't know if Cameron's trying to call me, but whatever. Anyway, Isn't it fun when things just like all of a sudden run into a crisis? Well, that's Uranus, folks. And, we got to take it on the chin, right? And just do what we can and try to be prepared. Like with all these rains and stuff, and that it's hurricane season. Last year I had to buy like lanterns and electric reading lights and all that stuff, which of course you can't recharge unless you go to your car. Anyway, okay, I digress. So let me go back to Mercury in Libra. He's going to be in Libra altogether until November 5th. And between September 26th and October 18th, he's going to retrograde. Now, it's during Mercury's retrograde period, when he backtracks through Libra, which is the sign of relationship, partnership, balance, harmony, negotiation, and compromise. I think that we'll probably be revisiting and rethinking and revising any past agreements made with others. And we may again see that most prominently on the global or national screen. So again, review, rethink, renegotiate, etc., plans that will prove more acceptable to both or all sides then. And, we're moving into, as I said, September 6th, Virgo New Moon. Now, Virgo is going to be about detail-oriented communication. We can see on the political level that the House Committee, the U.S. House of Representatives Committee, is now asking for the detailed recordings of conversations had on January 6th, the day of the Capitol riot. These things will increase, right? And again, we may have to negotiate our way as we are finding that anything that we need detailed information about might not come that easily. And the Virgo New Moon is the time for us to plant seeds around warding off chaos, not by trying to control our environment, but by attempting to work with it through establishing daily rituals. I mean, a lot of astrologers are going to tell you, oh, it's a good time to diet and all that kind of stuff. It's fall cleaning. We have the spring and the fall, right? We're moving closer to the fall equinox. We're going to, which is when the sun will move forward into Libra, and we'll have, cleaning out of basements and attics and things like that. And God knows I could use it. So this is a time to sort of corral all of the things that are no longer necessary, to pare down, to get lean and mean. But at the same time, to understand that Virgo, as the Virgoan ruled part of Mercury, wants to collect information and data, wants to assess it, wants to categorize it, and wants to efficiently look at it in a manner that allows it to make conclusions. So we plant seeds toward that purpose now, because extraneous stuff doesn't matter. Opinions don't matter. Facts matter, right? And the way that we ward off chaos, because Mercury's Virgo archetypally has always been about, it's always been opposite to Pisces, Neptune's Pisces, and that represents chaos. So Mercury often wants to ward off chaos, and the defense mechanism it uses to do so is by controlling its environment, a place for everything and everything in its place. So now is the time for us to do that, to carry that out, to accomplish that. In a way, it's sort of like a brain dump, right? It's like clearing our mind of all those things that overhang us and make us worry about our imperfections. And as a Virgo rising, I know this quite well. Oh, I didn't do that, and oh, I should have done this, and oh, I didn't do that right. Now I have to fix it or forget it or whatever. So instead of becoming obsessive about those things, the Virgo New Moon says clean the slate, right? Make your schedule, because Virgo, as the ruler, Mercury's Virgo rules the 6th house of health, service, and daily routines. So we want to get a hold of our daily routine. And one of the best ways to ward off chaos, which is an unconscious fear of Mercury's Virgo, is to set up daily rituals. And those daily or weekly or monthly rituals are things that become habits. And when they become habits, we're better able to control our environment. So rather than having to clean furiously every day, every week, every month, rather than having to worry about, other people's opinions if they come over and think our house is a mess or that we're not perfect in some way, this is to plant the seed to say, I am perfect in all my imperfections, and that no matter what happens, we can control our environment by rising above to the Piscean Neptunian realm and listening to the messages from the divine. So meditation, creative endeavors, etc., prayer, chanting, anything that brings in that Neptunian rhythmic thing, dance, music, arts, all that stuff, is the way for us to circumvent the harshness of any Virgo energy that we may be carrying, and to allow ourselves to let in some of the chaos, some of the water, some of the emotion around it that serves us, so we can better integrate these two archetypal energies. Okay, my time is at an end now, so I want to thank everyone for joining me today, and I hope you found the information presented here helpful as you continue your karmic evolution in this lifetime. Please be sure to join me next week on September 9th for another episode of Karmic Evolutions, Astrologically Speaking. Until then, may your journey be filled with karmic healing and the joy of greater consciousness. Namaste.
Long ago, before this day's confusion did begin, throughout the stars did we go wandering. Distance was no barrier, and time it had no hope. Free to come and free to go. Free to come and free to go. Open up the book of stars.